G'day everyone. So we are very lucky to be joined here by Brad Cleveland. I'm a huge fan, you know that. I've been, and I feel like our relationship as friends has also grown over the years, but it first started as me being a huge fan of all the work you've done and the books you've written. And so again, as always, really grateful to have you here and just sharing some stories.
Thank you so much, Luke. And that goes both ways. It's been so fun to see your career and to run into you in different parts of the world and see this profession grow up. And
thanks, mate. Yeah, it's been good. One thing I learnt recently is that Brad is also a pilot, and that really was super interesting to me. And I think I haven't heard that story from you. I haven't heard that around. So I really wanted to dive into that because the work that we do at Operata, I think this is a great analogy for that. So around observability, what is observability? And so many people ask that question. And the analogy I've been kind of playing with is around this whole, pre-check, in-flight, and then all your telemetry, real-time telemetry as you're flying. And so I've been really keen to find a pilot, and lo and behold, here you are. So let's dive into that. So we often get confused with assurance and monitoring. And although Operata does that, we do a lot more. And so, let's steer into this idea of the pilot. So tell me, firstly, how did you get into that?
I've always loved aviation. When I was just a young guy, build little models and dream of flying. So after university, went out and got my license. Mm-hmm. I'm a private pilot, so just single engine aircraft. I have a hobby though. Mm-hmm. I do what I can to arrange to fly in other aircraft, especially vintage aircraft.
Oh, so wow.
Been in an American P-51 Mustang from the 1940s, a British Spitfire.
Wow.
A 1923 biplane. Okay. That was fun. Qantas was a client for many years, and I got to ride in the cockpit of a 747 between Auckland and Melbourne. Okay. That was amazing.
Yep.
And I flew in the Concorde one time.
No way.
Between London and
New
York.
That's always been one of my dreams, is to fly on the Concorde. When I was young, I wanted to be on the Concorde. Unfortunately, that never happened, and may never happen. Although they are talking about bringing that.
They're actually pretty far along with some next gen versions of supersonic travel. So
that's pretty amazing. I used to have model airplanes hanging up in my room as well as a kid. I used to paint model airplanes and B-52 bombers and Spitfires, and I was right into it. So this is really cool. So talk to me about when you first get into a plane. So maybe even before you get into a plane. I'm assuming there's sort of a check of the plane, right?
There is, and you'll see even with the most modern aircraft, you'll see the pilot walk around the aircraft and just do a visual inspection. You wouldn't think you could see a whole lot that way. But, lay your eyes on it. It's been a rule forever, and so if next time you fly commercial, look out. You'll see them walking around the plane.
Mm-hmm. What's the whole idea of that?
You're checking surface areas, you're checking just anything that looks out of sorts. And every now and then there's something you need to take care of. So, and then of course the real check is in the cockpit. You go in and there's a procedure. It's a very dialed in checklist for any type of aircraft. Mine would, for a little single engine plane like I would fly, would be a lot simpler than a 747 or a modern commercial aircraft. But you go through, in many ways, a similar checklist where you're looking at instruments and looking at avionics and all the things that need to work like they're supposed to.
So if I take that's the assurance part. So when we talk about assurance when it comes to observability and testing and all that sort of thing, it's the idea that you think everything's going to work. You do a check, we believe that everything is where it's supposed to be, and technically this plane should fly, or this contact center should work.
Yeah.
So that's the crossover there. All right, so you're in the plane, you've done all the pre-check, you're ready to go. Now it's time to take off. Where do you shift from pre-check to what are you looking at now that you're up in the air?
Yeah, that's a great question. They're very similar to really any customer service kind of environment. There are two types of standards. One is can be answered by a yes or a no. So am I on the right frequency? If I'm not, I can't talk to the tower. I don't know what's going on. So very simple. I got to be on the right frequency. I've got to be on the right runway. You know,
Yeah,
you can't be on the wrong runway, or that could go badly.
right.
If you're landing, you've got to make sure the landing gear is down.
That makes
There's
sense.
no degrees. It's
there's
yes or no. So there's
Otherwise, it's pretty rough.
yeah. Am I at the right altitude? All those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yes or no. Then there's the finesse part, and the finesse is just that touch that makes flying smooth and makes it comfortable, and it's the and flying's like riding a bike after you learn it and get used to it. It's that part's pretty second nature.
Gotcha.
So you want to make sure both the foundational part, the yes or no, and the finesse part is working.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when I put that into context of what we do at Operata and what people are doing in the industry, and we talk about monitoring, the monitoring is making sure that those siloed pieces of information, the yes nos, as you said, and I think one of the examples, can you speak to the tower? That's one of the things we do is your microphone working, but then there's variations of that, right?
Yeah.
It could be that the finesse might be that, hey, it's your boom mic's further away and maybe you can't quite hear, or maybe you're using the wrong microphone, maybe you're using your laptop microphone instead of your headset, and so that audio is going to be not quite right. So there's that's the finesse side of it, right? So
maybe you're talking, and tower's like, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the finesse. So the finesse is the feeling of those in between parts, or maybe it's only one-way audio, and that's the monitoring. That's that single piece of information, and that might come from many siloed pieces of I'm assuming different dials, right?
Yes, and in flying, it's one of the questions I had before I got my license is how do you watch all of the instruments? Even in a small plane, there's a lot to look at.
Yeah.
How do you watch all of that?
That's interesting.
And fortunately, and this is true even for the Concorde. When I flew the Concorde, it was back before some of the security restrictions. Now I could go up in the cockpit, and the pilots were showing me it's the same principle as that 1923 biplane.
Okay.
There are some instruments right in front of you,
Okay.
and then there's supporting information. A lot of supporting information in a modern jet, mind you. But if you're watching those key things in front of you and looking at them together, airspeed, altitude, rate of descent or climb, you can make some engine information. You can make sense of what's happening, and then you can look at supporting information as you need to.
And I'm assuming you'd also get things like weather patterns coming and knowing where your flight's got to go, if your turbulence on its way, all that sort of stuff. That's really interesting. I think that to me is the closest link to what is CX observability. It is that real-time telemetry, bringing all of those various dials together into one piece of information, using that as a guide as to what you need to do. What do you need to adjust? What do you need? What maybe is not working? What do you need? What's the upstream impacts that are impacting downstream? What weather's coming? All of those things. So that's something that we don't see in the industry. We don't see that CX observability bringing all of that telemetry together from multiple systems to provide both technology, experience and operational data, to bring all of that data together in one place in that center piece. We don't see it. We don't see a lot of that in the industry, and that's where CX observability really comes into its own.
Yeah, and the parallel, Luke, and you're right in the middle of seeing these developments is as simple as we can make it for the pilot. If he or she has right in front of them the information they need from all these sources. And it's delivered in a way that's easy to interpret in real time. That's very powerful. So we are seeing the same kind of development efforts in customer experience.
Yeah.
The modern cockpit, even in the most sophisticated aircraft, is much simpler and much cleaner in layout than it used to be, with all these disparate dials and information. And back in the day, you had to have a third pilot, an engineer, just to watch all of that.
I can imagine.
Now it's really laid out cleanly and in an integrated way, increasingly in front of the pilot. So I love to see that in the CX space.
Yeah.
These tools that bring together this information.
Yeah. Well, sounds like you need to get a demo of Operata at some point, mate. That'd be good. Brad, this has been super interesting, and I think this is a really cool take. It's a different story than I've heard from you in the past, so that's cool. Thanks for entertaining me with the idea of how do these cross over and helping our audience understand what CX observability is in a much simpler way.
So it's a real privilege. And talking about flying, I'll do that any day of the week. So
Yeah,
sometimes you have to kind of shut me down once you get started.
No, let's go. I think it's good. I think this is way more interesting than some of the stuff we hear on repeat and the echo chambers that we often are a part of. So I think this is a really fresh story, a fresh take, and I love being able to bring that together with a different story and link that to something that's quite tangible for us at Operata. So thanks, Brad.
Well,
I really appreciate your time.
You bet.
Hey, until next time, and as always, hooroo.
Bye-bye.